Well, these revelations about cyber attacks on urban transportation systems, on a major food supplier, on healthcare companies, major gas pipeline, they've raised major questions about what's next, what puts U.S. businesses and essential services at risk. So joining us to discuss that is Tom Bossert, ABC News contributor, former Homeland Security advisor to President Trump and President George W. Bush. So, Tom, as I just said, you've been involved in two administrations trying to protect the country from cyber attacks and other threats to the Homeland Security. Are you surprised that here we are, all these years later, and that these dramatic vulnerabilities have been exposed in just a few weeks?
Unfortunately, I'm not. And I talked to Ann Neuberger, the White House official that's got my former responsibility now, this morning. And I was really encouraged about the memo she put out on behalf of the administration today, essentially warning them that the threat is increasing, that foreign governments aren't willing to intervene. Some are abetting and supporting these groups, and essentially telling any company that thinks they're outside the target list to think again.
And, I think a lot of Americans have been surprised, obviously. We've heard about cyber attacks, but now we're living them. They're impacting our day-to-day lives in some ways. And the threat, the prospect that this would increase is somewhat alarming. So for people who are interested, what kind of ideas, what can we be doing better, not just citizens, but our governments, to prevent a major attack on our nation's infrastructure? Should companies plan on just paying these ransoms into the horizon as Colonial Pipeline did?
As a matter of public policy, that's a terrible idea. You don't want to reward the bad guys. You don't want to fund their efforts, and paying ransom does both. As an individual corporate risk management matter, you can't fault some of these companies, especially those that have already been hacked. They've got to find some way to resume their business operations. So Americans should be worried about this. I think a number of things have changed, but the geopolitical landscape around all of this is only one of them. I think the other is that these criminal groups are finding that their incentives are lined up with all of the adversaries of the United States. And we've got all sorts of vulnerabilities. So today it was a meat processing plant, yesterday an oil pipeline, tomorrow maybe an energy grid, energy provider, or really a local store that you rely on. These types of risks are a little bit hard for people to understand, but their computer systems are very vulnerable. And one of the messages that the White House put out today was threats are serious and they are increasing, meaning they're aware of what's going on and what the future plans of these bad guys are.
In a borderless world, every time you turn on a device, you're inviting a lot of people you don't know, perhaps into your company, into your home, and into transit agencies. We're learning more about the attack on the New York Metropolitan Transit Agency, the largest in the country. That happened in April. The Massachusetts transit agencies. The hacking group involved believed to have been Chinese, and the FBI now says the attack on JBS Meat Company likely carried out by a group in Russia. So how do you rank or evaluate the threats from those two adversaries, I think we have to call them at this point, Russia and China, in this sphere, the cybersecurity sphere?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate as to who's the bigger threat. What I'm worried about now is the fact that the two countries are clearly working together. China and Russia are showing all sorts of evidence that they've rekindled their so-called Sino-Soviet alliance, something very troubling. And it goes into this larger geopolitical risk picture that I just referenced a moment ago. If the Chinese and the Russians come together in their desire to destabilize the United States, then we are, in fact, in a sort of Cold War II. And in my view, the battle space of that new Cold War will be the proxy battle fight of cyberspace. And you just allow a third party that you call a criminal group enough for plausible deniability to carry out the attacks that help undermine the United States, and you foster them, allow them to operate. That's why I thought President Biden saying that he's going to hold countries accountable for the groups that operate within those countries against our interests to be an escalation and a very positive development.
Well, and he has an opportunity, as you know, in less than 2 weeks to deliver that message personally to one of those adversaries, President Vladimir Putin, who's been there since Clinton was president. And it seems to me he's played just about every U.S. president since then. If you were advising Joe Biden in going up against this canny and ruthless adversary, what would you tell him?
You know, interestingly, the first thing I tell him is not to underestimate him. Of course, Joe Biden doesn't need that advice. He's dealt with President Putin before. But this seems to be a slightly different version of Putin than we've seen in the past. He's almost gone through different phases. This is kind of Putin 3.0, if you will. He's not all that popular at home. Now, he's always rigged certain elections, or at least we've always felt that he's put a heavy thumb on the scale. But this time is different. He's facing opposition from the young professionals in Russia that don't agree with his tactics. They're turned off by the fact that he's poisoning and jailing his political opponents. He's now taken to arresting members of essentially their House of Representatives, their Duma, just for meeting. And they've got an upcoming major election in September where he'll no doubt lose some seats in his party. So I think what we're seeing is Putin consolidating power. He's changed their constitution to give him 2 more terms in office. And he's essentially telling his oligarchs to go out and do whatever they need to undermine the United States. And now he's starting to roll troops to the West. These are all things that are almost going to guarantee that he's got a strident, aggressive President Biden in his face. So and I don't see how he gets anything from this, but I do believe there are some opportunities for us to perhaps at least drive a wedge between China and Russia.
And there may be some pressure points, as you say, within Russia for those young Russians who have known no other leader and don't really have a great future. Vladimir Putin and his cronies get richer and richer, and they don't. And maybe there is an opportunity for U.S. pressure there. Tom Bossert, as always, for that expert opinion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Terry.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.